Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I hope unfortunately I haven't been able to attend the conference, so I hope that the rest of the conference has been wonderful for you all. So I have the privilege of going around the country talking to the small business community through the National Cybersecurity Alliance, and we see quite frequently, and it's no surprise probably to all of you, that the small business community is struggling. They're struggling to assess their risks, and they're struggling to then apply measures to protect themselves. You know, these small businesses are, they make up the supply chain of this country, right? There are about 30 million of them. They hold some of the country's most precious intellectual property. They are our manufacturers. They employ a significant percentage of this country's workforce. You know, they're the butcher and the barber down the street. So how do we help them protect their critical assets? You know, I like the saying, all boats rise with the tide, right? Now that we're here by the harbor. And so that's one of the things we're going to talk about today on this panel with these wonderful experts is how are we helping the small business community? So we have immediately to my right, Ola Sage, who is the founder and CEO of CyberRx. We, to her right, have Rob Arnold, who is the CEO of ThreatSketch. To his right is Pat Toth, the Cybersecurity Program Manager, NIST MEP. And then finally, on the end is John Horst, Managing Member for Technology and Innovation at Xanisty. Did I say that correctly? I know I asked you earlier and I've forgotten already. Technology Services. And so with that, we're going to kick this panel off here. And so the first question that I want each panelist to address is, how are you seeing the NIST Cybersecurity Framework being used across the country in the small business community?
And many of you may remember hearing of a title company that had been hacked, and the hackers were watching emails go back and forth, and the information that the hackers were able to gather was when the funding for a transaction was supposed to happen. And so right at the right time, they inserted themselves, sent a fake email to the buyer and said, please wire the money here. Well, of course, that wasn't where it was supposed to go. I focus on small businesses all the way down to the sole proprietor. Real estate agents are a perfect example. Your typical real estate agent is not going to be hiring a CISO anytime soon. And it really, they need to understand, we need to translate for them. We need to be able to help them understand the risk of the data that they're working with and then what they can do about it. The cybersecurity framework becomes a very good tool, but you really have to lay some common sense, everyday, ordinary language foundation in order for them to understand what it is that they're protecting.
So John, we're going to start the line of questioning actually with you, and that is, you talked about foundation, and when a business starts, right, they need a good foundation, particularly their information security and the IT infrastructure. If they start it out, then they can scale it appropriately as they scale their business. And so, you know, you work with the startup community. How are you helping startups integrate the NIST Cybersecurity Framework?
Yeah, if they don't have a business plan, I strongly encourage them to take the time to write a business plan, because that business plan then becomes something of a concept of operations. Then I understand what they are doing, what business they're in, and how they plan to go about executing that business. And then from there, it's a matter of helping them identify what kind of data are they going to work with. We can't start by asking them to inventory their assets, because their assets are a laptop and a smartphone. I mean, that's it right there. We can't start by asking them to do an inventory of their assets. We have to start by asking them to think about the data that they will be working with. Will it be personally identifiable or personal health information? Will it be intellectual property, proprietary, trademark-related data? Or will it be otherwise competitive value data? And I call that any kind of data that if your competitor got a hold of it, they would be able to either get an advantage over you or one of your partners. And if, as they are imagining the data that they're going to work with, if they can put it into one of those three categories, and then we talk about confidentiality, integrity, and availability, then they know, at that point, I think I can explain to them why the framework is valuable, why it's important, because now I've helped them understand what they're protecting.
Yeah, that's good. So we're going to turn now to the C-suite. And we're going to try to convince them that cybersecurity is important part of that.
Daniel, can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Yesterday I was at a presentation here at the conference. CIS has a risk assessment methodology. It's relatively new, and it was built around litigators' experience in proving that a company had exercised due care with respect to securing its data. And I think that I find that especially interesting because I've done some expert witness work, and to be able to show an executive a plan and say, let's not think about if you'll be hacked, let's think about when you're hacked, okay? Let's think about the eventuality that it's going to happen, assume it's going to happen. How do you defend yourself? How do you mitigate against these risks? How do you defend yourself in court so you can protect your bottom line? Yeah. I think if we start talking to executives in terms of the risk of litigation, how to plan so that if they end up in court, they have everything they need to mount the strongest defense. I think that's a real powerful way of helping them understand the value.
Oh, that's great. And I'm going to, oh, there's a question, yes.
Yes, I want to ask each one of you how you would put a value on the intellectual property in your company, the trade.
Yeah.
I want to dovetail back to what you said. You said all the way down to the two-man shop. And I think that, to me, needs to be our key performance indicator, our key success indicator. We are not successful until we can get a two-man shop to a place where they are in compliance, as you mentioned. I think we have to be careful about two things. When we read the controls, especially those of us who worked in the DoD sector, they read like a requirements document. And we generate test documents from that with a pass or a fail check mark, right? And so we tend to look at this from a compliance mindset, which is binary. You are either in or out, as opposed to a risk management mindset, which is, do you understand the risks and do you have a plan to address those risks? If we can help the two-man shop understand that when they read these controls, they're immediately going to come up with all of the reasons why they can't. If they understand that these controls are baselines that they might not be able to do right now, but they can plan for, then the mentality is how we can.
So, lessons learned, right? So, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework's been out for, what, 4 years now? When working with small businesses, what are some lessons we've learned when implementing the NIST Cybersecurity Framework in the small business community?
I'll start this one off. The first lesson is the framework itself it is not quite keeping up with the cloud. With infrastructure as a service and software as a service, the boundaries are almost non-existent now. You almost can't think of boundary defense anymore. And that's why, for me, when we talk to small businesses, we focus more on the data before we even get to the framework and talk about how to use the framework to secure your data. I think we have to keep up with developments in the cloud because, again, your real estate agent, the extent of their assets is their hardware and their smartphone. And they might be often Google Suite, G Suite, or some other cloud provider. How do we help them understand where their data is going from birth until death, and then ensure that it's secure in each of those places? And most of those places will be beyond their day-to-day affirmative control. There will be cloud providers, and we need to be thinking a lot more. I think that's the biggest lesson that I take away from it.
I think incentivizing them is a great...
Yeah, I have one other thing. You know the certificate of good standing that all companies have to have? Wouldn't it be, this is just an idea, but as part of that, getting a certificate of good standing from your state, that there's some element of making sure that your company is either using or doing something that demonstrates that you've conducted or executed some sort of fiduciary responsibility to, yeah, and so that when you get a certificate of good standing, it's kind of holistic. It's not just about your revenue and other things, yeah.
I think that one of the things that we're going to see happen in cyber, if you look at a quality management system in ISO 9001, that's kind of like a certificate of good standing as far as your QMS is concerned. And for the most part, if you want to do business with the government, you have to have a QMS in place. I think we're going to end up in a place where cybersecurity is going to look a lot like ISO 9001, where a company will come in and consult, help you develop a security plan, and then another company will come in and audit that periodically to make sure that that you'll be certified, whether it be against the Cybersecurity Framework or some other standard like ISO 27001. But the other thing I wanted to mention, the Ohio State Senate has a bill in the hopper that if it becomes law in Ohio, a private sector business that implements a framework like CSF will enjoy what's called an affirmative defense. So if they do end up getting breached and end up getting sued, if they can show in court that they implemented the framework, then it makes the plaintiff's job much more difficult to prove negligence, and it limits their liability. I would encourage all of us to go, get to know your congressman or congresswoman's staff and sit down with them and say, I need your help to explain to my customer why they should do these things. And if we had a law at the national level that afforded a private sector company an affirmative defense if they implement this framework, then it becomes a lot easier for us to explain and quantify the value of what we do.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't heard about that one. So I do have one question that I will get you addressed to you guys, and that's, so we're talking a lot about implementing the framework, some laws that might come about, but small businesses are resource constrained. They're also not cybersecurity professionals, many of them. So how do we help small businesses implement the NIST Cybersecurity Framework? How do we help them make this leap? I've stunned them.
I think when I look at the framework, there are like 8 or 9 so perspectives that are listed on the NSF website. And they're all, I would call them bureaucratic perspectives. None of them really speak to an individual's role in a company. Gallup, interestingly enough, has this thing called the B10, the Business 10 assessment tool. And Gallup has reduced the roles in business to what they call the rainmaker, which is the executive, the conductor, which is the operations person, and the expert, which is sort of a technical person. And to me, those 3 perspectives are the perspectives that we need to speak to if we're going to help small businesses understand. There's an executive perspective. They are the ones that need the right information to make the right decisions for their business.
And for a small business, that one person might be all 3 of those.
One person might be all 3. In most cases, in a startup, you're like your 2-man shop. It's one person being the executive and the rainmaker and the conductor. The executive and the operations person is the same person. And then they rely on a tech guy or gal to help them with their computers. So the operations person keeps the trains running on time. When you come and show controls to them and talk about how to secure your business, you're going to get pushback from the operations guy or gal. They're the one that are going to push back on you. They're going to say, well, we can't do that and deliver value to our customer at the same time. And so you have to be able to talk about how you can, not why you can't, to the operations person. And then you have the technical person. I like to say that they're the ones that work miracles, but they know full well there are no such things. They're just cool tools. And they're the ones that want you to write a check to provide them that scanning tool or that utility that they're going to use to help secure your network. If we can speak to the executive, the operational, and the technical perspective and explain cyber in everyday layman's language to those 3 perspectives, we'll start getting traction.
How do I evaluate my help?
To be quite honest with you, I've met and worked with a lot of really great people that have certifications, and I've met and worked with people who have certifications that I would rather hire somebody that has a QMS, an ISO 9001 quality management system background and an aptitude and interest in IT, because the quality management system professional will have the right mindset when it comes to risk management, process, understanding process, documenting what you do. You've got your as is and your to be, and putting together a plan to get to where you need to be. The quality management system professional will have the right mindset in that respect. what level of training that they will need by way of IT, if they are have a reasonable aptitude for IT, I can send them to training classes. I can help them get, up to speed on the IT side, but having that mentality that understands the difference between compliance and risk management, for example, that's where I would go with it.
And also differentiating between IT and information security, right? Making sure that when we go out, we find an IT person that, information security is a completely different career path. Do they have a background in working in this industry? Do they have a track record? The credential is one piece of it, right? But do they have experience of working with companies like this? And also, pulling into your industry and looking at trusted partners who might be already working in this industry is sometimes a good way to find that talent.